Welcome to The Flux, where we hear stories from people who've asked what-if questions to better understand the world and talk about how data can help tell stories that impact decisions and create an intentional impact on the future. This is your host, John Cordier, CEO at Epistemics. In a world where the flux capacitor from Back to the Future does not yet exist, people have to make difficult decisions without always knowing how the future will play out. Our guests are people who've taken risks, made decisions when uncertainty was high, and who have assisted decision makers by using data and models. We hope you can turn lessons from our podcast into foresight so you or your organization can make better decisions and create an intentional impact for others. Hey there, welcome to The Flux. We have Stefani Crabtree on with us today. Stephanie, thanks for joining.
Nice to meet you and be here.
Yeah. So we're at the CSSA Complex Social Systems Society of the Americas Conference. Happens every year in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Stephanie was a keynote this year. So Stephanie, why don't you tell the group a little bit about what got you into agent-based modeling in the first place?
Yeah, so my background is in archaeology, more or less. And so where to start? I always say rewinding the agent-based models in my head to make different decisions. So when I was an undergraduate, I was actually many different majors. I was a political science major, a music major, a theater major.
Okay.
I went and studied abroad in Paris, and I enrolled in a theater class and was like, oh no. But I also enrolled in an archaeology of Egypt and Islam class.
Okay.
And I was like, I am changing my life. I am going to become an archaeologist. And I got to do weekly tutorials with my amazing professor, Annie Forgeot, and we went to the Louvre and all this stuff. And so I drank the archaeology Kool-Aid. And then I finished my undergrad degree, had a Watson fellowship, traveled around the world, did anthropological research into traditional medicine. I promise we'll get to the agent-based modeling eventually.
It's never a linear path.
Never a linear path.
No.
Then after the fellowship, I worked in a human rights nonprofit and then did contract archaeology for a while. So if you're ever putting in a gas pipeline or a wind farm, you have to bring in archaeologists on public land to make sure that you're not disturbing archaeological remains. So Native American remains or historical remains, so anything older than 50 years. So I was doing this work for a while and thought, I want to go back to graduate school. And all of my friends, I was living in Boulder, were physicists. And so I was aware of computational approaches, but not necessarily agent-based models. But I saw my friends making these models to understand distant stars. And I thought, the past is distant. Could we use models to understand the past? And at the same time, I was also a musician. My bass player was a PhD student at CU Boulder. And a book came out, Model-Based Archaeology of Socio-Natural Systems, and I asked him to rent it for me. And I remember him showing up at my show, the Buffalo Rose, with this book saying, I checked this out for you. Don't lose it. I'll get in trouble. Yeah. And I read this thing, and I think I probably understood maybe 25% of it, but it was written by Sander van der Leeuw and Tim Kohler. And I wrote to Tim Kohler and ended up doing my PhD with him. So he was developing an agent-based model to understand the ancestral Pueblo Southwest. And I didn't know where I wanted to work archaeologically, but I knew I wanted to understand human-environment interactions in deep time. I wanted to be able to do that all over the world, and I saw agent-based modeling as a path to do this. And so I really applied to multiple graduate programs, and in every single one I said, I want to do agent-based modeling. And most of the professors said, what is that? This is 2009 when I started graduate school. But I got into a couple programs and decided to work with Tim Kohler, who was the architect of the Village Ecodynamics Project agent-based model. And I did my master's looking at exchange networks in the American Southwest, and then stayed with him for a PhD, and also got a second PhD in France using agent-based models in France to understand the beginning of the wine industry. Okay,
now we're talking. So, one of the things that comes up, agent-based modeling can get applied in a lot of different domains.
Yes.
And, my domain was public health. So, epidemiology, people we can accept agent-based models somewhat. What are some of the pushbacks that show up in anthropology or archaeology related to agent-based models?
So I would actually characterize a couple different things with pushback. And one pushback comes from being a modeler.
Okay.
So I think that one of my biggest challenges working with people who don't do models, who want to model human systems, is that they want to put everything in the model. They think that everything is going to be important. And that can be really difficult in an agent-based model. And so that creates pushback, I think, from the scientific community writ large, because they think you can put anything you want in a model. Because I think a lot of early models were people trying to put as much stuff into it as possible and not understanding how the parameters interacted. And as a modeler, I think you have to be very aware of when people want to put too many things in it. When you're doing ecological models of wolves, like the wolf sheep predation model is a beautiful model using a lot of Volterra dynamics. Wolves can't talk back, so they can't tell you, you really need to include a better model of reproduction. You know, you need to include that morning I actually had chipmunks for breakfast instead of sheep. But with people can talk back. And so one of the challenges with being an anthropological person and modeler is both stopping myself from wanting to put too many things in. And if I'm working with collaborators who think that too many things should be put in. So that is one bit of pushback. It's early models, a lot of stuff gets pushed in, and it makes it difficult to really say whether or not this is telling you something about reality.
Do you think a part of that's people just get excited about having data for something? They're just like, oh, well, we got to use it because we have it.
Sure. Oh, for sure. I think people get really excited about the thing that they really care about in their system. But one of the things that I think is great about how agent-based modeling has been going with more training and more papers and more replication is that people are getting a lot better at building the models up from simplicity to complexity. So you're not throwing everything in together and saying, how does this interact? But you're starting with the simplest and then adding things. So I would say a lot of pushback has been about whether or not you're putting too many things in and whether this can tell you anything about the past. And then other pushback that I have received is kind of flattening society. The humans are so complex. Can we really model that? Is it a good thing to model people and the complexity of people? And I think that one thing that my work has shown is that there are questions that models can enrich our understanding. It doesn't simplify our understanding. It helps us to really be able to get at aspects of the past that are really intractable unless you have computational models.
That makes a lot of sense. So was some of your own inspiration to understand the past is to say like, well, and here's how this presents current context?
Absolutely.
About decisions we're making today?
Absolutely.
And how is that kind of like have you been able to like bridge people into that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So a lot of my work is not agent-based modeling. I have many different things that I do. One of my papers uses network models to look at what humans do in ecosystems and uses simulations to look at natural fluctuations in ecosystems. What do people do there? This paper was published in 2019, and it was work that I did while living with an Aboriginal community in the Western Desert of Australia. And this paper specifically has been picked up by the Australian government for a couple policy documents, which really surprised me because I was doing it because I had a really big interest in understanding human ecosystem interactions and doing anthropological work, working with Mardu Aboriginal people, learning from them. And so it was rewarding for me to see that something that I thought of as kind of esoteric is actually helping to guide policy in Australia. And it's not why I sought out to do that work.
Sure.
Yeah. Another paper that is agent-based modeling and is not guiding policy, but this paper I published in 2017, and it looked at the growth of hierarchy in the American Southwest. And this came about because I'm a middle child. And middle children like to make sure everybody's happy. Okay. And there was this long-standing debate that got really acrimonious in the 1980s, where archaeologists who worked in Chaco Canyon who saw these burials of these very interesting individuals who were buried with copper bells, with turquoise, with macaw feathers, with cylindrical jars that on testing the residues, they had theobromine, which is in chocolate. So that was traded up from Mexico. They were saying, this is a hierarchical society. These are the chieftains, seeing like this is a hierarchy. And then you have anthropologists who work with the descendant communities like the Hopi or the Zuni or the San Ildefonso, where there are strict leveling mechanisms to make sure that people do not aggrandize, don't have more than their neighbors. They, make sure that this is an egalitarian society. And though there was these big fights that happened in the 80s of people saying the ancestral Pueblo people were hierarchical and people saying, no, their descendants were not, so they're not hierarchical. And so I built an agent-based model to be able to make a digital archaeological record that I can compare against the stuff that we had, to be able to say, if there's hierarchy, because you know everything that goes into your agent-based model, this is how it would grow. This is how I can compare the data to what we see. And this is how I can weigh in on saying something. And the punchline is that both sides are right. It starts unhierarchical. We have hierarchy that grows in about the 1100s. And then when we have really poor weather conditions, that hierarchy starts to break down into these regional hierarchies that then collapse as people abandon the area. And so this paper was, I think, my first real foray into using agent-based modeling to really solve an argument, a long-standing acrimonious argument. And since then, it's really advanced Southwestern archaeology. So not used in policy, but very, I think, in its own way important within the field of archaeology.
And when both sides were able to kind of see, oh, this is how something plays out.
Yeah.
It was able to have a discussion and they were able to have an actual conversation about it rather than an argument about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We see that come up in a bunch of different areas too that are more in the health side. So like you have this balance of, if you're creating a new health product, you want to sell it. And then obviously insurance companies, they want to say like, well, we only want to pay like this much for it. And then, in pharma, it's like they're trying to get more of this adoption. And it all comes back to you're trying to price something, you're trying to get it adopted, and how do you figure out a solution where like both parties can be happy? And so this sort of like mediation of like bringing people together around a model can be helpful.
It can be really helpful. And it's, I think, any scientific tool, including principal components analysis, can be used poorly. And people can put in certain things that shouldn't go in together or use data that just doesn't make sense or, p-hack or whatever. But agent-based models, if you use them in a principled way, can really be used to advance science because you know what you're putting into it. You're trained well, you're making sure that you are asking the right questions, and can be used in this mediating way where you can really understand something more about your system. And like I said, I like to make sure people get along. And so being able to ask this question, which was very interesting and pull together so many different kinds of data, was really, I think, a rewarding use of agent-based modeling.
Absolutely. So, a couple more questions. One of them that we like to ask everybody that comes on the podcast, what is it that you think would make agent-based modeling more accessible to more people?
So in 2021, I, with two co-authors, Iza Romanovska and Colin Wren, published an open access textbook, Agent-Based Modeling for Archaeology.
And we hear that one, it's been a top seller.
It's been a top seller.
Yeah.
I mean, you can buy it on Amazon for $10, which I think helps. So if you were a physical book person, and then you can download it for free. And we recreated something like 76 models and walked people through building so many agent-based models. We did a SIR model in there. We brought things in from political science. We brought things in, from anthropology, from archaeology, from the tragedy of the comets. We did a lot of different social science models for archaeologists. And this has had a lot of uptake. And this was really Isa and Colin and I had been teaching little workshops at the beginning of our conferences that were selling out, except they're free. They were fully capped for the number of people that we could have. And we thought we really need to write a textbook because we're already writing all these tutorials and this can reach more people. And I think that a lot of us who went to graduate school in the 2000s, so I started graduate school in 2009, we taught ourselves. And there was a lot of trial and error. I did have a course in agent-based modeling at Washington State University.
And was that like NetLogo or this was like something totally different?
Oh no, it was Repast.
Okay, sure. Yep.
And that was like right into the fire. But I think a lot of things I had to teach myself are, there's just so many things that we had to teach ourselves. And so having these resources that are affordable, I think is something that can bring agent-based modeling to the masses. We had a blog for a while that was the Simulating Complexity blog that we just stopped working on at some point. But, things where we really cared about other people learning how to do this, both so other people could make their own models, but also just having that model literacy. Thinking as a modeler is different, I think, than other ways of thinking about science. And it helps you to break down a problem when you have to think about how would I be able to model wolf-sheep predation dynamics. You have to think about, the step-by-step, what are the things that you would care about? If you want to model hierarchy, you have to think about, what do I care about? Are the people individuals? Are they families? What are they? How would they develop a hierarchy? So in mind, they were fighting over arable land when populations got high. And so being able to think step by step, I think, is very helpful for any scientist,
So given you study the past, and so I was like, the big question that we ask everybody on the podcast is getting back to a what the flux moment. So a what the flux moment is a point in time, could be your life, could be in the history of the world, that if somebody made a different decision, the world might play out a little bit differently. What would you go back to? And what like, how did something play out? And like, what might have played out differently in your world?
Okay, I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you one for the world. I'm going to give you one for my life.
Okay. Cool.
And since 2012, I have been working in Mongolia. So one of my closest friends has been working there since 2007. She and I met doing contract archaeology. Dr. Julia Clark. We co-lead NOBAD Science, which does field work in Mongolia.
Okay.
Mongolia is a beautiful country, and everyone there loves Genghis Khan. So we could say Genghis, but they say Chinggis. Okay. Everyone loves Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan.
Chinggis.
Okay, got it.
Everyone loves Genghis Khan, right? He is a hero. He is a folk hero there. Chinggis vodka is like the top selling. It's a very fancy vodka.
We'll have to add that for the next time we get together.
If you can bring it here. The stuff filtered through mare's milk. So good.
Okay.
But so everyone there loves Genghis Khan, and he is seen as this folk hero. But outside of Mongolia, we see him as this disruptive force. And the way that the Mongols spread from Mongolia out toward Europe was massive, and they definitely killed lots of people, and they definitely changed a lot of things. But the thing that stopped it from happening was so Genghis Khan died, and then they had to recall all of his sons and all the generals. They had to go back. They had to go on their horses back to Mongolia and have a vote, essentially. I hope I am getting this history right.
Yeah.
What would have happened if Genghis hadn't died, or if they didn't have to do that? So when I was in Poland, in Krakow, for the computational archaeology meetings many years ago, I got to see the Krakow Underground, where they have this exhibit of the Mongols. They recreated some of the houses that they found that were burned by the Mongols, and it was this like emotional thing.
Mongols are all the way into Poland?
Yes.
Wow.
but then
No idea.
stopped and they went back. So that would be my what the flux moment. Would it be a good thing or not? So this is a weird thing because in Mongolia, everyone loves Genghis Khan. And elsewhere, it's like he was stopped. And so he didn't go through and destroy medieval Europe. But medieval Europe would be very different if Genghis Khan and his soldiers had been able to make their way out to France. And so my French PhD, I studied the beginning of viticulture. Would French people be well known for Eric, the fermented mare's milk? I wonder if Genghis Khan had made it out there. So that's my what the flux moment.
Okay.
What would the history of the world be like if the Mongols had continued sweeping west? I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. Folk hero and folk demon, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an incredible. Okay. You have a personal?
My personal one. So I had applied to graduate school, and
This is like 2008 then? Or?
I actually applied to graduate school a few times and got rejected.
Okay.
And I now have 2 PhDs and I'm an associate professor, and I think I'm doing pretty well. But I was not competitive in the graduate school world. I also think I didn't know what I wanted to do, and professors read my statement and they were like, no.
Okay.
So, but I decided I was going to apply one last time. And that's when I had read that model-based archaeology. That's when I knew about what I wanted to do. And that's when I got into grad school. But at the same time, I was a musician. So I have 2 CDs. I have a CD, I have a live CD, and I have a studio CD.
Okay.
And I played at the Buffalo Rose. That's where my live CD is. And I was doing really well. So I had my bass player who brought me the book, right? Who's also a professor now. And
the Buffalo Rose, this is in Boulder?
Yeah, so the Buffalo Rose is in Golden.
Okay.
And had a couple hundred people at the show. Went really well. And at the show was an agent, Lance Bensikin. And he helped launch the Fray, who was they're kind of one-hit wonder from Denver in the mid-2000s. And he came to my show. And he wanted to launch my career. And I went to his studio, and he wanted to record a new album with me, or an EP, and wanted to launch my career. But he said, you're getting a little old. So I was 26. And, that's old for being a musician. So we really have to do this fast. But I think you can make it. I think you could be the next Jewel. Or the next, Katy Perry wasn't out at that point. But he really wanted to launch my career. And I had this moment because I had just gotten my acceptance letter to graduate school. And I had this opportunity to pursue music. And I sat with it. And I had been doing contract archaeology, which is like being on tour. You live in a terrible hotel in Rock Springs, Wyoming. And then you're in Sheridan. And then you're in North Dakota. And you're, And so I just went, I don't want to live on tour. But my what the flux moment is, what would have happened if instead of going to graduate school, I said, Lance Bensikin, let's do this. And I tried to launch my career. And I imagine I would have had 8 years of trying real hard. And I would have gotten real tired. I would have gotten sick of it. And then I probably would have gone to grad school anyways.
There you go. Yeah. That, makes total sense. I also, there are a couple of books that I read that helped me figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah.
It's also led to about 8 years of just trying a whole bunch of things to try to make that work. So I think the lesson there is you have a lot of grit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also think
it's good.
One thing I tell my students is there are many paths to happiness. And so I think that failing at something, it can be really hard. And it can be especially hard if you don't have resources and it's hard to get back on your feet. But to the extent that you can look at failing at something as an opportunity to, when one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah.
But my yoga instructor, I have a 200-hour yoga certificate as well. I do many things. I pursue many things. She said, when you say yes to something, you're simultaneously saying no to something else. And I think that as an academic, it's a good thing to learn as well. But there are many ways to be happy. There are many careers. And have you decided what you're going to be when you grow up? Because I haven't. I'm 43. I have many opportunities to do many different things. I like what I'm doing right now. I love my department and I love my students and I love writing and it's exciting and archaeology is exciting. But I also love cooking and I love painting and like there are just so many things that we can do with our one beautiful life. And the cool thing about agent-based models is you can model all these things. You can model them in your heads. You could be like, oh my gosh, what if I had done this? What if I had done this other thing? And I don't know, it kind of wraps up for me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to tie it up. Yeah, the agent-based models enable you to ask what if and figure it out.
Totally.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being on. This is great.
Thank you so much.